The Skylark of Space by E. Doc Smith and Lee Hawkins Garby. So this is episode 67 of this ongoing series that I'm doing. And this book, while it was published in 1928, and this is the version I have and read of this book, it was actually written, I think, between 1915 and 1921. And E. Doc Smith was working on getting his doctorate in chemistry. I think he was involved in food grade chemistry. And a co-worker of his wife, Lee Hawkins Garby, kind of co-wrote this book with him. And from what I can tell, she wrote a lot of the kind of love scenes or the relationship side of the book, while E. Doc Smith kind of focused on the science and the adventure side of the story. Now, this book is heralded as, like it says on the back, the original space opera. And you can read the back there. It talks about the characters a little bit and the plot. But, you know, there was probably other examples of space opera before this, but this was kind of like the real formula that people took and ran with in the future, it seems like. And I believe it's one of the first books that people actually left the solar system on spaceships and whatnot. You know, I might be missing some books out there. This is kind of what I've read on the internet, but a lot of people think that this is kind of like one of the first space operas. And it was, I believe, the first book that E. Doc Smith ever published. He went on later to write the Lensman series. He wrote sequels to this as well. And it's a very important book. I'm glad I read it, but wow, was this book dated. It was probably the most dated book I've read in quite a long time. The characters were dated. The science was really dated. The dialogue, the plot was kind of silly. There was a lot that you could make fun of in this book, but if you put it in the context of when it was written and how influential it is, it's not that bad. There was also a lot of humor in this one. I think some of it was intentional, some of it was unintentional, just reading this over 100 years later. And right off the bat, I would just say, I don't know, I really wouldn't suggest this to many people unless you're really a student of science fiction and you want to read what is kind of considered one of the first space operas and see what all these other authors probably read and put the seeds in their head that they could write something along these lines. Maybe a little better, but, you know, this was written a long time ago. And so we'll give E. Doc Smith quite a few passes on some things in this one. Now, I'm going to call this a spoiler light book or a book review, but I'm going to spoil a lot of the plot. But I think if you actually want to go read this one, the plot is not why you're going to read this. You want to read this to see what was coming out back then, the ideas he threw out. You know, you can find some humor in this, but this is not a book you really want to read for the plot. So I'm going to spoil a lot of the plot elements. I think it's kind of funny. It might do good for this review to make it a little bit more entertaining. But when we start off, this book just kind of starts off with some scientists in a lab, and they're experimenting with some copper, and our main character, his name is Seaton, and he ends up kind of, you know, stumbling across this thing that just liberates the elements without a nuclear reaction. Basically, it just sends this piece of copper off into space with 100% efficiency, no heat loss, no nothing. It's kind of funny because it breaks out through his office, yet, you know, almost at the speed of light. He still has time to grab his binoculars and kind of check it out as it's leaving the atmosphere. But he's got a kind of a coworker or a friend that kind of buddies up with him. We'll just call him number 2. So we got Seaton and number 2 who want to use this to create some, generators that can create some free energy for mankind. And they also think this could be used to create like a spaceship. Now, there's a villain in this book, and his name is, I think it's Duquesne, something like that. He also has a nickname if you read it on the back. And he is just like, the total villain. And he's jealous. He kind of wants to steal this technology. He's not exactly sure how it works, but he ends up building a spaceship himself. He kidnaps Seaton's, his girlfriend and some others, and they take off in this ship, and there's like this kind of altercation that happens, and the ship kind of just, they can't stop it, and it goes faster than the speed of light, trillions of light years or whatever they stated in this book, and they're way out in space until the thing finally runs out of fuel, and they're just kind of like trapped out there. Well, Seaton, they form, a little team up, and they go out and try to hunt them down. And they have this really interesting device that you can just kind of hold it up and it'll track an object. Luckily, they put a tracker on this guy, but they can go thousands of light years and just kind of follow this tracker. And they end up, of course, finding this spaceship, rescuing the two women that were kidnapped, and kind of taking this Duquesne guy captive. Now they work out a deal. They say, hey, we got to get back to Earth. You're going to be kind of a member of the ship, Duquesne, but you're still our prisoner. And he says, all right, I agree, but if I get a chance to escape, I'm going to escape. And they're like, all right, whatever. And so they end up traveling around. They need to find some more fuel to get back to Earth. They stumble across all these different planets. Each one has different forms of life on it. So it seems like the universe is just teeming with life. They end up finally finding one of the elements they need to get back. And then they stumble across a planet that has this vast, intelligent civilization. And they kind of get caught up in the middle of whatever's going on there at this time. And they kind of get involved with all that, but at the same time, they know this planet has the other element they need to get back home. Now, it gets kind of funny at this point. I mean, the whole book has some funny stuff, but our number two guy, Seaton's number two, he starts taking a liking to this other woman that they saved from Duquesne. And all of a sudden, he starts taking all these cold showers and everything, and it's kind of really weird. And then they decide to just have a wedding at on this planet, and they get some of these, alien life forms to take part in this, and it's just really comical. And it kind of wraps up everything that happens there on the planet. Then they all get in, they have everything they need to get back to Earth. They just basically kind of like look out at the stars and wait till the constellations kind of start lining up. And then, they're looking out the windows of the spacecraft. And then they finally see a star that kind of looks like our sun. It's the right color. And of course, they make it back to Earth. And as they're kind of coming into the atmosphere and getting ready to land, right at the end of the book, our villain, Duquesne, he just jumps out, he parachutes out of this ship and kind of gets away at the end, and they land, and that's kind of the story. It's pretty funny. Like I said, I wouldn't really recommend this to a lot of people. It's very, very pulpy. The dialogue at times is just comical. I don't think a lot of it was intended to be, but there is humor. You can tell that they actually wrote some humor in this one too. But it's just kind of a time capsule and very interesting read. I am glad I read it, but I don't think I'm going to be seeking out anything else from Doc Smith. Now, a friend of mine when I was a little kid, he lent me Ender's Game, and I read that and I loved it. And then he said, here's the sequel, Speaker of the Dead, and here's this book, one of the Lensman books. I don't remember which one. And I was probably 15 at the time. I tried to read this Lensman book, but way back then, and it just kind of wasn't my thing. And so I put that one down, and I read Speaker for the Dead, and I love that. So I think I'm I'm just like, this isn't kind of my science fiction in a way. I understand this came out so long ago. There's people that grew up and read this as a kid. There's even people that will read this now and love it for the adventure and all of that. But I'm kind of glad I got this one out of the way. And like I said, I'm not going to really probably be seeking out anything else from E. Doc Smith. But, you know, that's that one. Next up, I'm reading Heechee Rendezvous, and I'm probably not going to do a review on this one. I'm going to probably just wait till I finish up with this whole Heechee saga and do kind of an overall review of the whole series. But I'm not exactly sure what my next review video will be, but just keep an eye on the channel and we'll see you in the next video.